Welcome to the Outer Realm with Michelle DeRoche and Amelia Pisano. Airing live on the United Public Radio Network, 105.3 FM in New Orleans.
Welcome, everyone, to the Wednesday night segment of The Outer Realm. Had a little glitch there. Don't ask me why. It wasn't working with me. Anyway, we're broadcasting live here on the United Public Radio Network and UFO Paranormal Radio Network, 105.3 and 107.7 FM from the beautiful city of New Orleans. We are fully sponsored by the amazing folks over at Folgers Coffee, who have been a part of our journey since the very beginning. And thanks to them, we are here not one, but 2 nights a week. So thank you, Folgers. We appreciate you so very much. Also, big thank you to Dr. Snick, the sonic surgeon, Justin Snicker, for his contribution of time, his voice, his music for our intro and outro. He's an award-winning composer of Halloween horror, sci-fi, and dark wave electronic music, which can be found anywhere that good music can be found. Also, big thank you to Steve McGinnis, the mind and the artwork behind our art, of course. Check him out on Instagram and check him out on Facebook. He's got stuff ready to go, and he does beautiful commission pieces. So big thank you to Steve McGinnis. Tonight, for the first time, I'm really excited about this, and I'm really grateful that he could make it on last minute. Dennis Stone. And he's the owner of the amazing America's Stonehenge located in New Hampshire. Very exciting. I thought to myself, how have I not been here? So I'm really looking forward to hearing all about it. If you guys want to interact with, of course, us and Dennis, you're going to have to head over to one of the 8 platforms. And that is for tonight. YouTube, UFO Gods and Extraterrestrials, The Outer Realm, UFO Paranormal Radio. Then we head over to Facebook, UFO Paranormal Radio Network, United Public Radio Network, News on the Flip Side, Joe Montaldo, UFO Undercover, Canada's Most Haunted, and The Outer Realm, of course. So please remember, we will get to you guys as soon as we possibly can, but picture this like 8 chat rooms, like a super highway of chat going into like a 1 lane. It's kind of like that. We have a lot of comments that do come in from different areas, and we do try to keep up with the guests. So we will do our very best to get to all of your comments, but please be patient with us. And I see he's chiming in. So let's go right to the bio. Let's get a nice intro.
Absolutely. Dennis Stone is the president of America's Stonehenge. He graduated from Daniel Webster College in 1977 with a degree in aviation management and was a full-time commercial pilot for over 35 years before his retirement in 2016. America's Stonehenge was opened up to the public in 1958 by Dennis's father, Robert Stone. Dennis has been involved with America's Stonehenge for most of his life and has always had a fascination with archaeology and archaeoastronomy. Since retiring, Dennis has found many serpentine walls and spirit windows throughout the site, amongst other new discoveries. He has taken numerous courses and traveled extensively to ancient sites, both in the U.S. and internationally. So please, let's welcome Dennis Stone to the show.
Hello.
Hi.
Woo.
Hi.
I know. I've been waiting for this.
Does she look
you?
Excited?
I know. Yes, I am excited. So, how are you?
Doing well. Thank you for having me on this evening.
Oh my goodness, it's such a pleasure. I'm just really grateful that you can do it at such short notice, because things drop off. People are like, oh, I can't make it. Oh, I've got the big C today. Like not C, like, the pandemic C. Anyway, it just seems to be recycling again. And we're just like, oh my gosh, this is crazy. But we are very grateful, and we appreciate you so much for joining us short notice. Everybody's already chiming in the chat room. What we're going to do as comments come up, Amelia will read them out, because we have probably 80% of our listenership is audio. So they're listening on servers literally all over the world, on different sites as well. So they can't actually see the comments. We're going to do something like this, so you can see them, and then you'll be able to answer, and Amelia will read them off, and then we'll go from there. So everybody be patient with us. Thank you. Anyway, where would you like to start? It's all so exciting. I mean, I always thought, I'm pretty versed in a lot of historical things and archaeological things. And I have to say, I was completely blindsided by this. And I watch all of the shows that this has come on. So I'm thinking I've probably seen this and been in awe, but not really pieced together the whole story behind it. So why don't you take us down the whole road as to what exactly is this amazing site that you call America's Stonehenge?
Well, it is an enigma. We're not sure who built the site. We think it was built about 4,000 years ago. And as my dad used to say, it's a well-kept secret, but that's not our intention. So you're finding out about it's not unusual. That happens quite a bit. Next year, we'll have our 65th year that we've been open to the public. Wow. It actually has been worked on archaeologically since 1937. It's been written up, in different books and magazines, different TV shows, but it's still really not that well known, as you know. We are trying to get the word out, but the site we think is an ancient ceremonial site. We're located in North Salem, New Hampshire, about 40 miles from Boston, right up Route 93, exit 3. It's a very easy hike up the highway. And we're in southern New Hampshire, about 20 miles from the ocean. The biggest river near us is the Merrimack River, one of the largest rivers in New England. It's about 5 miles away.
Beautiful. Yeah.
In the Spigot River, which is a tributary, goes right by the bottom of our hill on the west side. But the site consists of about 110 acres today. These are stone ruins. They're rough stone constructions. They sit over the entire hill pretty much. But the main site, and I sent you a number of photographs of different parts of the site, but the main site has about 1 acre of stone structures, chambers, plaza, courtyards, and underground drainage system that covers the entire 1 acre. It keeps it dry. So somebody actually engineered a complete underground storm system drain to keep the place dry before they actually built the chambers over it. But we don't think it's a living site. We don't believe it's like, the Flintstones where you lived in these chambers. However, they do look a little bit like some of the Flintstone homes. They have stone roofs.
They do.
And some of the roofs weigh up to 28,000 pounds of very, very large slabs of stone that were quarried and then placed on top of the structures, which is a little unusual. We know farmers and early settlers moved stone around. They built in New England about 240,000 miles worth of agricultural or historic walls. But our walls actually appear different than these walls. And we'll get into that in a little bit about the serpentine walls and some of the other different shapes. Yeah. But it is an astronomically aligned site, too. So ceremonial site, possibly burial, possibly a place of religious practice. And I would imagine, during ceremonies like the winter solstice, summer solstice, spring and fall equinox, people would come up and celebrate. The hill is about 360 feet above sea level, and the site sits on top of the hill. And that's not unusual for an ancient, ceremonial site to be up high near the heavens, if you will. Where the people lived is still a mystery to us. If it was a domicile site, a place of living, you'd find the refuge, what we call the middens, all the trash left behind. Even if a lot of them are perishable, you still find a lot more either pottery or stone tools, utensils, weapons, that kind of thing. And we have found those on the site, but not the great quantity you would find from people living on the site.
Right.
It's just not like that at all. I will say that our site is kind of the Reader's Digest of these sites. And we're not the only site. My dad got involved in 1955, and they knew of about maybe 24 sites throughout the Northeast. Today, that number, it's not only in a greater area from Canada, Quebec, and Ontario, all the way down to Virginia. We're finding these stone ruins, but about 800 different sites. So a site could be like ours with 106 acres of chambers, walls, and we mentioned the serpentine walls and constructions. It could be one chamber like in Windham, New Hampshire, just one structure. Or it could be like North Stonington, Connecticut, and North Stonington is on the South Shore of Connecticut. Only 6 years ago, I became familiar with that. There's 8,000 different stone structures in that town of 35,000 acres and 25 different categories of structures. And they look just like what we have on our site, except ours is kind of compressed on about 110 acres. So our site's a little unusual, as you probably saw looking at the photographs, but it's not the only site around. It's sad because across the nation, these structures exist, and we weren't taught these in, elementary school, grammar, high school, even going to college. Most people never hear about these things, or even on the media. Except for we appreciate your media because it is getting the word out. Because a lot of these chambers are being destroyed today by development, and if you can work out something with contractors like that chamber out there, if you can build around it, or if you're putting a highway, if you can build around it, that'd be wonderful. And then it's a win-win for everybody. Yeah. But when my dad got involved, there's a couple of loops around Boston. There's Route 495, it's an outer belt, and also Route 128, which is part of Route 95 from Maine to Florida. And when they put in 495, there were some beehive, what we call beehive, look like a beehive kind of structures, like you see in Ireland, kind of dome shape. They're no longer there today, So 60 years ago, they were putting the road in. My dad got to see them, I think, photographed them, and they're no longer there today. I think today, maybe they would try to build around them, which again would be a great, win-win thing, Get a highway and save the structures. So we're trying to get the word out to protect these sites from vandalism, from destruction, and also to try to get more research done on them, investigation and that kind of thing. It's a slow struggle, actually.
It is. It's fascinating to me when you look at the technology, when you say how heavy these large stones are, and when you think about how far back you think they go. I mean, it could be back even further, like who really knows, unless there's some way of testing. Who do you think could have had that type of technology to build some of these things? Like, it's sophisticated when you look at it for the time.
Yeah, they did definitely put a lot of work and effort into it. And on our side, it looks like they planned it, especially with the underground drain system. Some of the drains run 75 feet. They carve channels through the bedrock, and the channels actually lead into underground tunnels, if you would. And some of them are large enough for a little kid to crawl into. And they keep the main site dry from snow melt and rain and that kind of thing. And the rock, it's granite. It weighs about 163 pounds per cubic foot. And so we can estimate the weight of these structures, on the stones without picking them up, just do the dimensions, Yes. And like I say, one of the largest roof slabs is about 28,000 pounds. So it's no easy task moving that.
No.
And then putting it up on top of the chamber, and the other thing we found out over the last 40-something years, one of our researchers, Dr. David Stewart Smith, he started with us in 1978, and he had already worked for the British government doing repairs in Scotland and in England on megalithic and medieval structures. He went over there in 1972. He's from Connecticut originally. When he came back in 77, he learned that our site existed, plus others. And he was kind of blown away because he had seen very similar type structures in Europe, In Western Europe, you have Stonehenge, but there's 50,000 other megalithic sites throughout the entire western part of Europe. And these go from the Neolithic into the Bronze Age. And they're just all over the landscape. So there's technology on that side of the ocean that was able to do this.
Yes.
So on this side of the ocean, Native Americans in New Hampshire, recently I found out that they go back as early as 13,000 years ago in the western part of the state. The New Hampshire Archaeological Society is finding evidence over there. We thought, years ago, they used to say, well, maybe several thousand years. And then it went back to about 10. And now they're finding evidence of 13,000. And the glacier said, actually, the Younger Dryas was still around that time. So I don't know how these people made a living or survived, but they did. They did. Yes. And so Native Americans have been in New Hampshire for that long. And people often say, well, if your site is 4,000 years or older, who was here? Well, we have people here in New Hampshire going way, way back into the Paleo, going into the early Archaic, into the Archaic. Were they the ones that were responsible for these sites across the Northeast? I definitely would look at them first. Absolutely, And they may have had a big, big part of this, maybe 100%. But there are some interesting features and different pieces of evidence suggest that people were coming over not only before Columbus, but possibly before the Vikings. They were in Canada 1,000 years ago, but there's some other pieces of evidence suggesting they're here at a much earlier time period.
Right.
So that's a great question. We haven't been able to answer. Our minds are still open, but we are finding similar features from here, not only up in Canada, and that area in Ontario and that area up near Peterborough, Ontario, but
Yes.
in the Baffin Islands in Canada, coming right into Newfoundland, right into Nova Scotia. But there are interesting features out in Alberta, Canada, too. I think it's called the Milk River out there. There are inscriptions that seem to be old world inscriptions. And there are serpentine walls and other features that are in Canada going all the way up to California, actually. Near Mount Shasta, we have serpentine walls in a town called
Mount
Weed.
Shasta.
Yeah, such a beautiful area, and very, very spiritual, very, as you know,
There's a lot of stuff in Mount Shasta.
So we got to go see that, see some spirit walls, and go out and see Mount Shasta, and the cave there too, the caves there.
Oh yeah.
So that was on my itinerary. I was going to speak at the out of Santa Cruz at the university in 2020, but as you mentioned, COVID, it kind of was a conference center. The whole thing got messed up. And it was going to go virtual instead of being there. And I wanted to go there. I wanted to see the surf capital of the world, and I wanted to go to see the Berkeley Wall. Yeah, different things, including the Berkeley Wall, which is kind of famous, an ancient wall that goes from supposedly Oakland up to the Canadian border. Nobody knows who built it. However, it actually starts in Santa Cruz, I found out. And I'm like, wow, great. How far from the university is that? And I was going to go up to Mount Shasta, but they canceled the beat in person there in Santa Cruz. So they made it a virtual. And that week, the Holzer files from the Travel Channel came in and filmed all week. So everything got kind of turned upside down. I haven't made it out there yet. So that's on my bucket list, to get out there and see some of these features on the West Coast too. So
it might be nice to see how many you can try together.
Definitely, yeah. So we're going to try to get out there and see that. But we had no idea when we started in the 1950s that this was so wide range, some of the features. Were the people on the West Coast related to the people on the East Coast? Possibly by trade. You trade not only goods, but you trade ideas, So it's a possibility this thing made its way either from out there to here or vice versa. We're just not sure. They're in Alabama, too. And Dr. Holstein from Jacksonville State University, we became familiar with him about 3 years ago. He's been working on his serpent walls since the 1970s, and we didn't know that. And he calls them rattlesnake walls. But there are cons, there are monoliths, and there are the serpentine walls in the 40 square mile area of down in Alabama. And he's going to try to eventually meet up with him at the university and show us some of these. But he's aware of ours too. So I think we're going to find out more things, not only in Canada, but in the United States too, that are there that we just are unaware of, They keep popping up.
I think you do have to work with like minds. It's something that's open. I know people who are working on these sort of things, and it is fascinating. The information is definitely out there, but how can you go about carbon dating or just dating something like this scientifically? Like, do you have any assistance out there at all for this sort of thing?
Yeah, they actually started doing some carbon dating on the site back in 1966. And we ran 12 different carbon datings on the site. And a group called New England Antiquities Research Association, NERA, and they have a nice website, nera.org, was formed by my dad in 1964 in our basement. And the group is still... Cool. Yeah, and my dad started that group in 64. There was a group before that called the Early Sites Foundation from 1954 to 1964. And he had two professors from Yale, from Dartmouth College. We had people from the president of the Connecticut Archaeological Society, among other people in that group. But by 1963, a number of the members had passed away, and they dissolved the group by 1964. So my dad started NERA in our basement. And the group is still going strong today with several hundred members. We even have one of we have state coordinators up in Canada, the provincial coordinators. Terry Duvall was in Nova Scotia. He's been on History Channel a bit. He was the first Canadian president of the group. And in Quebec, actually Montreal, Gerard Leduc, a gentleman up there, was the coordinator. And he used to bring people east of Montreal to see some of the stone ruins up there, chambers and so forth, just east of Montreal. And Boston, Massachusetts, one of the big newspapers actually did a whole story. I'm looking at the paper going, oh my God, that's what we're into. That's Gerard, doing the tours up there. I think he has passed on since that happened.
Right.
So, But so carbon datings, we've done 12, and they went from 66 to 1995. Most recently, we've been doing optically stimulated luminescence testing, and Dr. Feathers, it's a testing you can date dirt or you can date rock.
Okay, I'm like, and this is what?
Yeah, it's well, it's called OSL, and you can date dirt or rock, and you need certain minerals in it, like potassium feldspar. You need quartz, or you need even calcite. And they take the dirt or the rock samples, but they can't be exposed to the sun or outside, light. So it's done in the greenhouse. I mean, in a dark room environment, basically. And so you build a structure, and soil very slowly deposits, say, next to a wall or on the roof. And in the oracle chamber, which I sent you pictures of, we found out in 2020 when we heard this was going to be done at our site. They actually asked us. We said, sure, And it was the University of Washington, Dr. Feathers, and he came all the way out from there, and he did 4 cores at our site, and he did 22 places from our site all the way down to Virginia at some of these stone ruins. Wow. It used to take 5 years to process do the test processing, whatever they have to do. It used to take 5. Now they're down to about 2 years. He had 2 Brookhaven National Laboratory women with him, and he had about 25 people up there on the team, geologists. We had NERA members, and we had the LIDAR, and we had the ground penetration radar at the time, mapping where the cores came from. It was a whole day. It was done on 9/11 in 2020 at our site, and after that, they spent the next, I guess, week or two going right down to Virginia, taking other cores. So the oracle chamber roof was a good candidate. We found the soil depth was between 17 and 24 inches. We thought it was only like 5 or 6 inches of dirt on top of the chamber. Wow. And it was satisfactory. They took the cores, and the dates came out just recently after 2 years of 10 of the places. The other 12 places, I think they still have to do the processing. And they're all pre-colonial dates that are coming up from here to Virginia. And a couple of them are pre-Columbus, so pre-Columbian dates. And all they tell you is when the dirt came in and covered the chamber. The chamber, as Dr. Feathers says, was there first. How much longer before the dirt is unknown. It could have been many, many centuries. The carbon dating, the 12 we took, put the earliest part of the main site back to 4,000 years before present. And we had 3,000-year-old dates from the main site also. So we think construction was around that time. So the dirt from the OSL dates seems to be something that accumulates, and it comes in from windblown particles and vegetation decay. It takes about 100 years to 125 years for an inch of soil to accumulate, unless you have erosion, washing it away. So that's a New England rate. So 24 inches could be quite a few years of accumulation. So we're excited about this new type of testing. I think it started at the University of Oxford back in the 1980s, but they're like radiocarbon dating started in 1950, but it took many years to really perfect it. Some people agree with it today. Some people don't agree with carbon dating. We get all sorts of visitors at our place, and people even say, well, I don't know, but I heard carbon dating doesn't work. But they've been using it for almost over 70 years now, and it's pretty expensive. The OSL is $1,000 per core. And they took 4 cores from our site. So you have to have funding. You just don't go around. I would love to date all the serpentine walls, because some of them are sitting on bedrock, but some of them are sitting with an accumulation of soil. And one of them actually was tested that day. And the date was that it was already sitting there at 1400 AD. So it wasn't some crazy farmer building it 200 or 300 or 400 years ago. It goes back before Columbus. And how much earlier than that? I don't know how long it took for that dirt to accumulate next to the wall where they got it, but the wall's older than that, as far as we know. So,
and how many of these do you have?
As far as the serpentine walls?
Yes.
14.
And see, that in itself, you're lucky if you find one or two on location. 14.
And they go from about roughly 27 feet in length, all the way up to the biggest one is the watch house. And I think I got some pictures, both LIDAR of that chamber and the illumination inside of that on the equinox. So that wall we GPSed about 5 years ago. It is 2,550 feet long. So it might be one of the longest serpentine walls around, and it's twice as long as the Great Serpent Mound in Ohio, which is really amazing. It's in Peebles, Ohio. That's pretty. If people know about that, it's supposed to be on the United Nations World Heritage Sites.
Yeah, it's spectacular.
But I think COVID tied up everything and all that. But it's an amazing site, and it is an equinox and solstice.
With serpentines, like the size in size?
So ours, like I say, the 14 vary from 27 feet all the way up to 2,550. So the biggest one would be about twice as large in length as the Great Serpent Mound in Ohio.
Okay.
And I'm familiar with a couple of the guys. I've done some radio shows with a couple of them that are involved with that out there.
Mm-hmm.
Jeff Wilson, and I've communicated with Ross Hamilton. They're really big out there. They're excited about ours. And when I was on the radio show a couple of years ago with Jeff Wilson, turns out he had visited our site a number of years ago, way before the serpent walls were found. So he was quite fascinated by that because he's got the serpent mound out there that he's involved with,
Oh,
so
yeah.
it's a great connection,
The fact that you've got 14.
We might find a few. We think there are a couple more up there, but when you look at them, you're not 100. Well, none of this, we can't talk to the builders, so we can't be 100% sure on all of these. Right. But when you see them and they undulate and they turn, they twist, they have tails, like pointed tails, and they have, the heads are either boulders or stacked heads. And now North Stonington, Connecticut has they have 400 of them in one town. And that's amazing. In one town, and I'm sure the residents down there probably don't even know about all of that. Hopefully they are. Hopefully they do. Yeah.
So what is the significance of these serpent mounds? Because obviously they're pretty spectacular, and I mean, architecturally speaking, they're unbelievable. Do you guys know what the significance of all these mounds are?
Well, again, if we could talk to the builders. Our thought today is that Draco, the constellation, may have inspired in the northern hemisphere. Have inspired people.
I knew it. I know.
Yeah, and they say that about the Great Serpent Mound too. And they think there's 94 of those serpent mounds going all the way out to Iowa. So when you look at the Great Serpent Mound in Ohio, which is amazing, and people, it's just an amazing structure. People should, look it up, Google it, whatever, or visit it. But they go right out to Iowa, and there are other serpent mounds. But the serpent walls might be even more, because one town has 400. We have 14, and they're in the Hudson Valley. There's 500 chambers in Putnam, Westchester, and what's the other county down there? But there's 500 structures down there, and they go right into Monticello, Woodstock, and Bethel, New York. And some of these structures are chambers. Some of these are standing stones, and others are serpentine walls. So, and they're in Pennsylvania too. So, but maybe Draco, possibly as above, so below kind of idea.
I know that just for different reasons, but that's a whole other show.
Well, there may be some other, the serpent represents so much, even Adam and Eve, or St. Patty driving out the serpent worship. But
the ancients actually believed, in that reptilians were very much like, draconians, much like subterranean beings on our planet long before we ever arrived here. So, they worked with them, they revered them, they emulated them. You can see them, South America. There's tons of different archaeology with respect to that. Definitely,
yeah. I mean, maybe that's an inspiration from that too, But even just snakes, we have snakes in our area. As a matter of fact, on Halloween this year, we had a VIP tour with Scott Walters and Haley, and they came down from Nova Scotia to Washington. And while they were standing looking at a boulder that was found during a near field trip in 2018, one of the members found it when we were out there on the hilltop. And actually, they got away from my tour. I don't know if that's, I don't know if I should be insulted, but they walked away from my tour. Nice. And they found what looks like a pregnant female carving of a goddess on one of the stones. So it was a really good thing. And when we were Scott, we showed the tour people, and while we're standing there, all of a sudden we look down, there's like 3 snakes walking around, crawling around all the people, and because some of the people were kind of freaking out, and there's a serpent wall just, down the trail, a short distance, so we got the serpents up there too, the real ones, so.
Yeah. I think it's all fascinating. I think you just go back to, ancient times and of course, going back because these things are all over the bloody world. So they've
Mhm.
always fascinated me. Why you can have an area that has over 400, and you have one property that's got like 14.
Yeah.
And then
How
come up
many are
to
you
Ontario,
missing?
we've got like one that we know of.
That we know of.
That we
Even
Yeah.
know
with
of, yes.
underground, even with the
Yeah.
sites that you have found, you still don't know how extensive it could go past what you think. You could have a blocked off tunnel because Earth has come down over the years. I mean, you're talking about it could be thousands of years for all we know.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and that's where we need people to come in and do more research. Ground penetration radar, we've been using it. It's non-invasive, so if you use that and you find something on the ground, then you can decide whether you want to do a shovel test bit or a full-scale excavation or just to leave it alone, But most of the time, if you find something down deep, you probably want to see it with your eyes too, perhaps recover some of the artifacts. So we've been using ground penetration radar also since the 1990s. On our site. And we've only mapped a small, probably a couple thousand square feet. We need to definitely bring it back. And Doria, a woman she's part Native American, she's been up during 2020, and she was actually working with a LiDAR guy who was a friend of hers. And he did 15 acres. It took 600 hours to process his data, and she's done a few thousand square feet, and I've helped her. She's coming back to do all the drains, the dozen drains that we have, some of them running up to 75 feet, as I may have mentioned. And she has a software now to take his images and blend it with her images, so we'll have 3D above and below the ground. That might be kind of useful as a tool, I think,
That is
So
really cool.
that'd be pretty cool. Yeah.
It's a great piece of technology. Have
It
you
is,
gotten
yeah.
any sort of
Yeah.
assistance, let's say from, academia in the area, archaeologists who want to put the funding into your site? It's pretty spectacular. It's a big area.
Yeah, that would be wonderful. We have individuals that come from different universities. The last one was a doctor from the University of Connecticut. He was up about 5 weeks ago with one of the NERA vice presidents, who's now he retired from that position. He brought him up, and the guy spent a couple hours with us walking around, and he's mainstream. And generally, he told me to my face, he goes, "I'm a skeptic, but not necessarily kind of a healthy skepticism. Ask the questions. Not closed-minded skepticism." But the takeaway on that is he was very fascinated with our site. His mind is open now. He's looking at the walls, the serpentine walls, the chambers, and he kept saying things to me that was very encouraging. And after I heard from that gentleman that actually introduced him to our site, the guy that was a vice president of NERA, he lives down right near North Stonington too, and he showed him North Stonington. He said, yeah, he says he was impressed with your site, and he wanted my name. I guess he didn't get my name when we were there, and he wanted my name. So he wants to come back and look at the site. He's getting ready to retire. He has a lot of pull, a lot of influence down there. And he knows some of the skeptical archaeologists too. And he is aware of the OSL dating and the carbon datings. And he actually was hired by the state of Connecticut to look at Gunjiwap. Gunjiwap is a site that's 250 acres of stone structures, a lot of the same features that we have at our site, including serpent walls, standing stones or monoliths, and even inscriptions. And it has been carbon dated, and they just did some OSL work with Dr. Feathers on that site. And again, that came out pre-colonial on the dates. And now that will be out there. And he actually has been working on that for 14 months now. And my friend that brought him up said he's had a change of heart. He's actually very interested in Gunjiwap. And then when he was at our site, my friend said, "What do you think about this site?" He goes, "Sophistication." He goes, the amount of detail work that went into building this, particularly all the drains, all the structures, and everything that he saw there, including the serpentine walls, and he didn't see all of them. He was just kind of blown away by that. So maybe he'll be a help. He's kind of big on getting funding. And that's what it's going to take to do more testing, I think, more research.
I might have a website I can send you and connect you with for that as well.
Yeah. Oh, that's great. Yeah.
A comment by Rob is actually tomorrow night's guest. Hey, Rob.
Hi, Rob. He said, "Hello, I used to live in New Hampshire and visited America's Stonehenge. They're very interesting."
Oh, thank you.
He's on tomorrow.
Yeah, so there's tomorrow's guest, everybody.
Thank you, Rob.
There's another comment. Just before we go too much further from Tamara.
Hi, Tamara. Tamara asks, "Why do you think it has taken so long for these sites to be taken seriously?"
Well, that's also a great question. our site back in the 1930s, William Goodwin was the first researcher. At that time at Harvard University, there was a great naval historian, Samuel Eliot Morison. And actually, Mr. Goodwin and Mr. Morison kind of butted heads. And Morison basically said, no explorers before Columbus. And Goodwin thought possibly Viking when he first saw our site. And as they started cleaning it, he hired a crew. And the crew was hired in 1937. The head was from MIT, Roscoe Whitney. And as they cleaned the site up, it didn't really look like a Viking settlement. There were no sod houses, they were all stone structures, with stone roofs. And he thought at that point, it could be something to do with the Irish Celtic monks coming over before the Vikings, going back, hundreds of years before the Vikings. Mm-hmm. But Samuel Morison wouldn't buy any of that. He said, yeah, there's nobody here before Columbus. That's it. He died in 1976. He wrote Admiral of the Ocean Sea about Columbus and the European discovery of America. Well written, and the gentleman's very, very, educated, very smart and everything. However, in 1960, they proved the Vikings made it to Newfoundland at Lonzo Meadow. And he knew about that, but he said, well, it wasn't significant. It wasn't that important. But it kind of went against his no explorers before Columbus, it kind of broke that.
Yes.
But they now think the Greenlanders were coming into Canada and possibly into the United States, or at least North America, for about 400 years before they abandoned Greenland during the Little Ice Age, starting in the 14th century. Mm-hmm. And before them, I read Folly Moore's book, the great Canadian author, and his book, West Viking, in 1965. He spent years putting that together. And when he put the book out in 65, he said, there's something missing. There's artifacts, which are these stone columns or cairns up in Baffin Islands and some of these boat-shaped stone foundations up there and sod-shaped foundations, which he eventually explains what he thinks they were, are still up there today. And he goes, somebody was here before the Vikings, way before the Vikings. And so if you read his book that came out a little over 20 years ago, and I just read it again, I read it 20 years ago, The Far Fares. He talks about people coming over here before Christ from the old world. And it's a fascinating book. He's so well researched. He spent from 65 up to 1999 putting that book together.
Wow.
And I don't know if he's still alive. He must be pretty old now if he's still alive, but it's a well-written book. If anybody wants to get into early visitations across the North Atlantic, he goes over to Europe and everything, explains who the Albans were, it's fascinating. We were just in Iceland, and Pythias, a Greek merchant from Marseille, France, actually made it up there in 306 BC, 1,500 years before the Vikings were in Iceland. And when I visited Iceland, they talk about it up there. I didn't even know if they'd mention it.
At least they talk about it.
Yeah. So before Christ, the Greek merchant, he's famous. He's the one that associated the lunar cycle or the daily cycle of the moon as the Earth turns with tides. Nobody had actually put that together. tides come up and go down, the Bay of Fundy and all. But anyway, he actually associated those two. Plus, he did some stuff with navigation. He was a very, very smart individual, but that was 1,500 years before the Vikings made it to Iceland, So Europeans, they were up there already.
Really fascinating.
He thinks they made it to North America. That's the other point. They went across Greenland, which they called Krona, like the goddess, or the god of time, Cronus, and it made it into the Baffin Islands, and the structures are still up there today. And he's got pictures of them. It's just stuff that's amazing. That. Yeah, right in Canada. Yeah.
I totally believe that. That makes a lot of sense. Not surprising. They find ways. They were seafaring people. And
they were.
The cold, they were not overly affected by the cold. If anyone could have done it, they most certainly could have.
Yeah, they're hardy sailors. Yeah.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Have you considered maybe opening up the property to universities of archaeology and saying, hey, our site, I would be willing to let you bring your students in. They do it in, Mexico, South America.
Yeah, they do. Yeah.
Students go in and they go and work at certain pyramids and certain sites. It may be a great way just to get your site excavated and somebody's getting an education at the same time.
Yeah.
It may be a good way to get funding as well.
Well, that's a great point. And we are always open to researchers, like to see the proposal, but we would welcome that, we always have, My dad always found it very difficult to get universities and schools. Individuals would come up, from different universities, but the schools usually send their students around the world, to other places. In fact, my friend, I mentioned her, Haley, she actually was in school for archaeology and took physics and astrophysics and all that. And she ended up in Mexico digging. Not in the United States, she ended up in Mexico for school.
I had a friend who did the same
typical,
thing. Okay,
Yeah,
I say let's
Wow.
open the doors to like
yeah.
people out of Europe and Mexico. Come on
And
up
come up
here.
here, come
We're
up here
sending
and
a lot
dig.
of people
Yeah,
down there for
yeah.
sure. This
I
is
think
just
these
like
sites
amazing.
need to be looked at, protected, conserved, and researched. They
Absolutely.
really do, because there's
Mhm.
so many of them. Our late David Stewart Smith, as I mentioned, he died in 16, just as I was finding my first serpent walls. And he was fascinated by that because he spent almost 40 years with us. And he walked
Mhm.
out in the woods and didn't know. But once he saw them and your eyes open up, and because we clear out some of the brush, it's like, how did we ever miss these things? My dad died in '09, and so many others have died before that never knew that we had possibly serpent walls. And of course, that they go across the nation. But David said, I think we have an ancient lithic or stone building culture across the Northeast. And that was back, I think, in the 1980s. He told me, so he'd have to expand that, I think, across part of North America, probably. And he goes,
Mhm.
they're undetected, they're ignored, they're ridiculed, and most of the public don't even know these things exist,
It's true.
And that's still kind of true today. So we have an ancient
Yeah.
stone building culture, and you were asking who they were. All I
Yes.
can say is they're a stone building culture, and they weren't farmers in the sense of colonial farmers. These are
Mhm.
maybe ancient people that did a little farming, but you're
Right.
stone builders. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Have you ever found any remains or bones or anything like that?
Yeah, they have been, and usually in New England, a bone will dissolve in a couple hundred years because the soil is very acidic.
Yes.
But in 1938, Goodwin found 3 bones that he on the main site, and that's that 1 acre area, and he held on to them, and we had them in our museum starting, I guess, 1958. All these
Mhm.
years. 1968, a teacher from one of the local schools, brought him to the Smithsonian down in Washington. And she brought a couple of different other bones too that came from our site, including the
Mm.
watch house. Dr. Lucy Huygen, in 1968, she was a physical anthropologist. She examined the 3 human bones, and she was kind of fascinated by them because there were some markings on them. And she said these markings had to be made while the person was still alive, like little cuts in them and everything. But she also found that they're very dense, denser than she would expect for a human bone.
Mm.
And at the bottom end of her, I got the report, and in fact, I have it on my screenshot on my phone. She says, basically, my feeling is he's a human. Well, radiocarbon dating wasn't done on them. They were found in 38 and you're exposed to the elements, for
Yeah.
over 30 years. And what I'm thinking, and I've talked to a friend who's done the Paracas skulls in South America, is
Mhm.
in fact, the laboratory he uses right in Toronto, is to bring them up there, or maybe one of them, and have them test them for DNA, which
Yeah.
see if that would work.
I think that would be a great idea because that would
Yeah,
definitely give you some idea, at least, the people or a
yeah,
people who
yeah.
were there at least for a period of time.
Exactly. Yeah.
Hmm.
Were they the builders? We may not know, but we might get because their bones are denser. So is that a different species? I don't really know. But she was concerned
Mhm.
by that. But she goes, they are. But she also looked at bones from the watch house. We were talking about the watch house as being part of a 2,500, and those bones she looked at, in her thought, were there a bison, or buffalo. So she
Mhm.
showed them to one of her colleagues, a gentleman, and he was more of a specialist, I guess. He looked at him and he goes, "Yeah, they're bison." She goes, "Yeah, but they're from New Hampshire." And he goes, "They were in New Hampshire." He goes, "It's the I think they called it the what they had a name for it, the country buffalo. No, they had another name, but we're a buffalo up here." And so he wasn't surprised by that at all. And they found right in the watch house,
Hmm.
In the watch house also a stone triangular flat piece of stone about 1.5 inches high. It's on display in our museum. Had a drill hole in it, and a piece of bone found right there too, about 1 inch long, had a drill hole in it. They were both found in the watch house. I thought, these are pendants for a necklace,
Yeah.
and for who and how old we don't know, but they were
Right.
found inside that same chamber. So maybe it's an
Huh.
offering.
I was going to just say, if you think this was a ceremonial site, maybe there would have been offerings done. That would make a lot of sense.
It would, yeah, definitely. It looks like that's a possibility, yeah. And it's a wonder the stone will last pretty much forever, but the bone being inside the chamber, including the bison bones, maybe they were left in there too as an offering,
Yes.
It's possible. We just don't really know, but that's what we have for bones up there. And then we have other bones that are found in the, over the years that are actually more recent animals, that have passed away up from the woods, but not. These others are very interesting though, especially those human bones,
Right.
Maybe we'll get the DNA of them.
Sorry, how long would it take to do DNA analysis on something like that?
Yeah, I got my friend, he lives in Malibu and he's got a place in Oklahoma, and he's been out doing filming on us. He's been in South America many times. I'm going to find out because he's done the process before, and he showed me a picture of the laboratory. I used to fly into Toronto all the time. I probably could have maybe got a Uber and gone over there and talked to the people in person. I said so many overnights, so many near your airport up there in different areas, different like the Salmon Hotel. I don't know, we stayed all over the place up there, but I bet I could have gone over there and talked to them.
The airport strip is quite hot in Toronto. I was born and raised in Toronto, so yeah.
We did a lot there. So, and that's where the laboratory is located, and he sent the picture of it. So he's had, in fact, I got to talk to him because he's going to try to come out this spring. He wants to take some samples off the Oracle Chamber roof where we got the cores and do some laboratory testing with those. He says, "Yeah, I'll come out there after New Year's." I said, that's going to be frozen until about May. The ground.
I will now
because he's living in California. He thinks it's warm. I have to keep reminding him it's not. It's not like Malibu.
It's the East Coast, yeah.
It's the East Coast.
Yeah, so it's freezing over here. Yeah.
Then we get mud season. So I said, you don't want to come here in mud season either. So maybe the summer. So
summer is perfect. Then he could come just in time for whale watching.
Oh yeah. So there you go. Yeah.
I love it.
Definitely.
All right.
Tamara asks, so do you feel we have lost a lot of historical sites due to the idea that removing historical sites was a way that the history of the Americans was rewritten by our forefathers?
Yeah, it's possible. I mean, I don't know if it's like an active thing, and maybe in some cases, possibly. A lot of it's just like ignoring these sites, But I will say some of the archaeologists, some of the really mainstream ones that are really close-minded, I guess, my opinion, is they say, why are people wasting the time on these sites, like our site and some of the other sites? Some of the archaeologists, why are they wasting their time there when they should be looking at legitimate sites? And I'm like,
Good old academia. Good old academia.
I don't even know how to answer that, And who are they to judge that?
It's just crazy.
It's history. This is the stuff that they want. They want to see remain buried. This is what they want. They don't want this to surface, and they are because, we're going climate change and let's face it, things are scaling back. We've got ice melting everywhere, and they're finding all of these things, and they don't want to. They don't want to talk about that.
They're afraid they might have to rewrite history books.
That's part of it too.
They're doing that with the cancel culture, anyways.
No, exactly.
Trying to. We've been in different things like Forbidden History, on a show or in books too.
Yes.
But I think there's a prejudice too. Maybe they don't want to know the actual past, but when you go to school and you get a master's or doctorates in history or prehistory, and then you learn that you may have learned it incorrectly, and you're now teaching incorrectly or writing books. It's kind of like if I learned after all 42 years of flying that I was doing it all wrong, I guess I'd have to swallow this big pill. I don't know, but it's a little bit. I mentioned Samuel Eliot Morison, No Explorers Before Columbus, but John Wesley Powell at the Smithsonian in the late 1800s, he was the head of the Department of Ethnology. He basically said, if you find any pre-Columbian Old World artifacts in the digs, a lot of the mounds out west, there may have been a million at one time. If you find any of that, you have to basically disavow those. So it's called the Powell Doctrine today. So basically, if there's any evidence of ancient stuff here, and it could have some connection with the Old World, for instance, whether across the Pacific or across the Atlantic, you have to basically not pay attention to it. So that kind of set a little bit of the tone too, and that was 130 years ago.
Yeah, the Smithsonian are known for, disposing of things and hiding things like the bones of giants that a lot of the indigenous people have found. They used to dump those in the ocean.
I heard that in the Potomac River too. I heard that too.
So you know what? Note to self, I shouldn't say it, but yeah, maybe not the museum you want to deal with if you're finding something really significant right there. I'll leave that right there. Send the hate mail to our producer, not me.
Sorry. Send it to Joe Montaldo at UPRN.
Yeah, that's right.
We do that to him all the time. I have to wonder, and I'm not a conspiracy theorist, but I do believe every theory has some truth. Do they not know what's there, or do they have documentation? Years after years, you collect things. There's journals, there's diaries. I mean, you go to the Vatican, we have Dante's Alighieri's works. Why wouldn't you have a journal of a civilization that was there before? Why wouldn't it be found? Why couldn't it be found? If you can build those tunnels, you can put papyrus together. So it's in a
Common
forest,
sense
right?
will tell you.
Common sense and, a little bit of mediumship. But anyways, I just have to wonder if there is, documentation and knowledge and a lot of facts stored somewhere. And, and that's why they're being the way that they're being, dismissive and...
It's possible,
fear. For me, that's a fear of something, Yeah,
I know in Scott Walter's book, talking about the Templars coming over too, and that the Vatican has document from around 220 BC that was written about people coming over across the ocean. It's fascinating. I'm just reading the book right now about that, and there's a gentleman that actually contacted one of them, a senior, he's like a priest over in the Vatican. He admitted that these documents exist, and that it does show that apparently, he goes, I'm not going to say yes or no or deny or whatever, prove it, but because they indicate that there were people coming across into the New World, well before Columbus. I mean, going back to the time of Christ.
Absolutely.
And I got the letter from this in this book is actual letter from the Vatican Monsignor, so I was just reading that today, going like, wow. And they say there's other pieces of evidence too, suggesting that we knew that people were coming over here. Well, and across the Pacific, and Atlantic too, both.
Yeah,
there has to be. I mean, we know there's ET civilization. We know all about that now, whether they're throwing disclosure or not. I mean, there's constant evidence being out there. Who knows what else they're hiding and they don't want to expose.
They've just shown though that the Vikings were in South America.
I know it's
before, like 800 AD. Dr. Kathleen Ann Ball found Templar caves in Brazil. 200 years before Columbus. So, I mean, it's
they say the warrior of the clouds, the Chachapoya in Peru. I think they had a big battle with the Inca, but they were ferocious fighters. They were very tall. Some were fair skinned with light colored hair. They lost the battle because they were outnumbered by the Peruvians, and I think the Peruvians were so respectful of them, they made them their honor guards for their own king after the battle was done. And they that might be some Viking there, because of the description, the Chachapoya, warriors of the clouds. So that's another one of those possibilities too,
absolutely.
In Verrazano, when he came in 1524 up to Outer Banks, he was looking for that Northwest Passage, but I used to fly that whole eastern coast a lot too, and I'd be looking down at Chesapeake Bay. He went past that, and it's a huge bay, went past that. Then he went past the Delaware Bay into New York Harbor, and he spent a little time there. They get the Verrazano Narrows Bridge. They do the marathon over. It's beautiful. Then he heads east, southern coast of New England. He gets into Narragansett Bay. He's met by a Native American whose name was Magnus, which sounds very Scandinavian. And he spends quite a bit of time there, right near the Newport Tower and the Narragansett Stone and the In Hawk Stone, and there's a couple other inscriptions there. And he said that they were very, very kind to him. Some were very Native American in their appearance. Others had blue eyes. Some had green eyes. Some were, but quite tall. And Roger Williams, 90 years later, got there, and he spent time with the Narragansett, and he remarked on that too. So two different sources, from what I understand. And I'd like to see a little bit more about that before I'm 100% satisfied with that. But I've read that in a lot of different books and in different publications, even in the NERA Journal, that group I mentioned. Sounds interesting. It sounds like, again, old world visitors intermarrying with Native American, and they would be dressed like them, but there'd be some traits of the, the European in them too.
100%.
Possibly,
100%.
yeah.
Oh,
Some believe,
I completely believe that. Absolutely.
yeah.
Absolutely.
And they say the word Narragansett could be a corruption of Northgate settlement to do with the Vikings, But again, is that accurate? I don't know. It's just something I throw out there. I hope I'm not putting out bad information,
Yeah,
but
no. Well, I mean, you're allowed to hypothesize. Everybody hypothesizes. So, absolutely.
Yeah.
Talk to us. You mentioned at one point, like the oracle chamber.
Yeah.
Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, it's a larger structure still intact on the site. It runs north and south, as I mentioned, out of True North. As you walk into it, you're kind of walking in. It runs north and south, but the entrance actually is kind of facing the west, and it's missing its roof lintel today. And we have photographs that have a beautiful lintel over the roof. The picture's taken in 1920, and one was taken in 1900, according to Goodwin. It's in his book. He wrote in 1946, The Ruins of Great Ireland and New England, one of his 4 books he wrote. And there's some beautiful pictures of the oracle chamber with its entrance still covered with, I believe, 3 roof slabs, including the lintel. Those stones are gone today. Dave Stewart Smith looked at them starting in 1978. It's like, where are they? Who took them? But you walk into it and you turn left, you're heading north, and you're looking down about a 27-foot tunnel, and it's about 7 feet tall. And as you go down about halfway, you'll see an opening. It's horizontal. You'll see light coming through. It's a 6-foot tube. This tube goes through to the sacrificial table. And this tube is about a foot by maybe, a foot. It's kind of rectangular shape more, though. And it goes 6 feet. And when Goodwin first worked on the site, both ends of that tube had stone plugs concealing it. They didn't know it was there when the first workers got in there. And one of them moved the rock. It came out, and they see this, this hole in the wall. And then they went to the other side, and they pulled out the other stone plug. And we have this horizontal tube, which we call the oracle tube or speaking tube today. And as you're standing below it, the bedrock had been removed, except right beneath it, they left a piece of bedrock still intact, connected to the bedrock. It's about 10 inches above the floor now. And you stand there, and somebody around 5.5 feet tall can stand there and speaking to the tube. And if you go outside by the sacrificial table, there's a ramp. And the ramp is on the west side of the table. And if you stand there, it could hold probably 30, 40 people. You're looking down at this table. When somebody speaks, the voice comes out underneath the table, kind of an acoustical thing.
Right.
And just 3 years ago, during some vandalism, we found that end of the tube, 6 feet from the oracle chamber where it goes in, is actually flared, kind of like a clarinet or a trumpet end. So it actually widens out. So when the sound goes through it, it helps to amplify it a little bit. And so when I was in Malta 25 years ago, we spent about a week over there, and I saw holes in the walls in some of the chambers. And I mentioned to the guide, I said, what do they think they were used for? He goes, somebody would talk through those. It was like an oracle. I says, we got something like that in New Hampshire, and he was really into that. I kind of described it, and I think we had a brochure and showed him what it looked like. So we think during a ceremony, perhaps a wedding, a death, perhaps the solstice, equinox, people would stand up there, watch a ceremony on the table, and hear this voice coming out and thinking it was a god, a spirit, or somebody speaking to them. And you can do it today. You can actually go there and we can do that for you today. It's pretty cool.
Yeah.
So there's no other function for it. It's not a smokestack or anything. We do have a chimney at the far end. As you continue past that, there's a hole in the roof. And until 1959, there were 2 stone louvers, and we have the photographs. I don't know if I sent that to you. 2 stone louvers that could be adjusted to adjust a draft if it was used for a fire. And somebody stole them in 1959, I think the second year we were open. So we no longer have those louvers. There's 5 closets in that beautifully made closets inside the oracle chamber. There's a bench seat across from one of them. It's carved right into this rock, and there's no tool marks, no metal tool marks. They took a 90-degree cut in the rock, and you can put about 3 people sitting there, and you're looking into this beautiful stone closet, if you will. And we think maybe they put something in there like an offering. And there's 4 other closets in there too. There's 2 carvings, one of a deer, but it really looks like an ibex. And if you look at the Iberian ibex, in Western Europe, there are different types of ibexes, and it looks like the Iberian ibex, which is where Dr. Barry Fell from Harvard University thinks these people came from. because of the inscriptions that were found at our site, very controversial. They were found, some of them go back to the time of Mr. Goodwin, others were found in the 60s. He visited us in 1975. He was at Harvard University, and he was the head of the Epigraphic Society, a group of like 1,200 people that studied ancient scripts across North and South America. Originally from New Zealand, went to school in Edinburgh, Scotland, and then he came to the States. And he wrote America BC in 1976, Bronze Age America after that, and Saga America. So he wrote 3 books and did a lot of publishing, and he died in 1994.
Wow.
And he said the 3 types of script he found at our site, as well as all over the Northeast, is Libyan, Celtic, and Phoenician. He said they came out of Spain, because we know the Phoenicians originated possibly in the Persian Gulf, and then they were in they were in the Middle East. They were the Phoenician coast, Syria, Lebanon, and part of Israel, the Golan Heights. I thought that area in there, and Tyre and Lybos and Beirut are all Phoenician cities. And they went across the Mediterranean, setting up 50 other cities for trade. And then they ended up in Spain and Portugal. They might have made it to the British Isles, into Scandinavia too. And then they set up 50 trading colonies on the coast of Africa, Hanno. I think it was 7 trading colonies they set up. He feels they launched off of Spain and Portugal, and they came to the States just like where Columbus launched from. And that's Iberia, and that's what this inscription looks like. The deer carving really doesn't have the antlers of a deer. It looks like the horns or whatever on the ibex, and you can Google that. It's like, wow, it looks just like that. The other carving I found in 1967 near the exit, it was a window, not really an exit. It's because of wear and tear and vandals and stuff, the hole got bigger and they made an exit out of it. It was a window. We think the sunlight would come in there and illuminate that ibex carving. Actually, we got to try that. We got to actually go up there and try it. Part of the problem is still on too many trees blocking the sun coming in from that direction. We just did a complete forestry thing over 2 winters with a licensed forester, and we got to see the watch house illumination for the first time. Wow. Before 2020, you could never see it. There was just a dense forest there. You couldn't see it.
Yes.
So the Oracle Chamber is interesting. It was named because of the Oracle Tube. It has 2 underground drains. One of them runs 45 feet just to keep the structure dry, and then it has it has a bed underneath that Oracle Tube. If you are standing there and look down by your knees, it's a big hole. It was man-made. It goes right to your left, 8 feet, and has a window. You can actually lay in there and you could be looking out this window. I have no idea. It doesn't look like a closet. It looks like somebody could actually lay in there. So if that is a ceremonial site, did a priest or shaman or somebody else, stay in there during the ceremonies? It raises a lot of questions.
What would they be looking at? The sky?
Well, the window only looks into the chamber. It's like you could actually observe anything coming or going. Okay, I think the structure, and if you stand above the sacrificial table, you can't see the oracle chamber. It blends into, to the left, there's actually a natural ridge of bedrock. They call it a sheepback. It's like a ridge. They artificially continued that on the roof of the oracle chamber. And then when you're standing up there, like there's a chamber down there. Right. So I think like the Wizard of Oz, if somebody was in there talking, people above would be like, oh my God, it's a spirit or somebody, possibly, kind of like the Wizard of Oz thing. Don't pay attention to the guy behind the curtain, I mean, for a farm, this makes no sense when you look at that chamber. It makes no sense at all. But it's an amazing structure. In the 1800s, some of the site was taken away. Some of it was taken away for the stones for other building purposes. So maybe 25 or 30% or something like that of the site's missing. So you see the foundations of other structures, where there are more oracle chamber structures. There's one area I think there was probably a similar structure. You can see the remains, but the roof and part of the walls are gone today. So there may have been another structure somewhat like the oracle chamber just to the south of it, So it's unfortunate it's not there today.
Wow. That's that's fascinating. It's just, there's just so much, to piece it all together with, you'd almost need information from other spots. You do. You really do. You got to, look at other sites too, No, absolutely. But the one thing that you say, scaling back all the trees, it just makes me realize, because there's another site I'm familiar with where things like this are starting to surface. They think it's one thing, and it may be partially, but it's starting to look like if they uncovered it, they would not be far off of what
Oh, yeah.
your area is like. Yeah,
Interesting.
I'll
Interesting.
send you that information. It may be
Yeah.
good to you guys to collaborate or something, because I'm thinking, you could probably give each other answers. Is that just based on the people that are kind of working it over there as well? But the constellations is something that interests me, because that seems to be something that the ancients would do. They would build on power spots. So I'll back up 1 minute and let's talk about your site being a power spot. Stargate, Gateway, the ancients always built these sort of monuments in places that they believed were power spots. And that usually did align with the constellations in many cases. Do you think you fall under that?
It's possible. I mean, there's different areas. I'm not an expert in that area, but I will say that there is a earthquake. It's a joint. It's another part of the earthquake fault line called the Clinton-Newbury fault line. It goes from Newbury, Massachusetts, which is to the east of us on the coast, all the way down to Clinton, Mass, which is southwest of us. And the whole hilltop is bisected by this fault line. So that might be interesting. I know Machu Picchu has that too, and about 700 of the stone circles they're in Scotland is about 700, but in Wales going into England, there's about the same number. And my friend Maria Wheatley's big on power on ley lines. She's on vortices. She's written about it. She's been on History Channel. Yeah. And I think you might have her as a guest eventually. She'll really get into
connected,
that.
Yes.
Oh, she's wonderful. And that's
yes,
that's really her expertise. And her dad visited us back 40 years ago. He was an archaeologist. She's an archaeologist. She lives right by Avebury. She's already done a little bit on our site using maps and stuff. And she's been trying to get here for the last 2 years, but COVID kind of messed it up. She did make it to
everything else.
I call it the dark ages. She did make it to Chaco this year, and she was in Malta recently. But she says your site is powerful. So when she talks about our site, or if you have her on a guest, get her more into the details of that. I will say, we talked about ley line. She says you have to have 5 points to make a ley line, according to what they have in Europe. She goes, in the States, sometimes you just need 2 points. But she goes, with all the research they've been doing for decades and decades, she goes, really, you need 5 points. But I will say that in 2012, my son Kelsey was using Google Earth, and he went along the summer solstice sunrise alignment. He just took it across New England. He continued, and what they did in the 70s, they looked on hills around us to see if there was other structures, and there are, where they aligned up with some of these astronomical alignments, and some seem to be. But back in the 70s, you had to actually go over there and look at these hills on private property. It was difficult. Today with Google Earth, it's much easier, So he took Google Earth around the world, and he ended up over in England, and he's been to Stonehenge a couple times with us. We took him over there, and he said, gee, this looks pretty close to Stonehenge. And as he changed the scale, he blew it up, and all of a sudden Stonehenge appears. So that line that goes from the astronomical center, it goes through a stone circle, then it goes through a stone monolith, which is a summer solstice sunrise monolith. And the monolith is actually shaped with an asymmetric top. And when we saw that, because the stone's always been there, and when we cleared it out starting in the 70s, so that's kind of funny. Most of our monoliths have a point in the center, kind of like an arrowhead. But, most, but not all. But when we opened up the clearing to the horizon, all of a sudden we could see the horizon about 5 or 6 miles distance. There's 2 hills that intersect, and they intersect the same shape as the top of that rock. So the rock kind of fits into the notch. And in Europe, they call those horizon features. You'll have the notch, or a little hump, the stone you call your foresight, then you have your back sight, kind of like a gun sight. Then you watch your object rise or set over these. So we're quite amazed about 50 years ago to clear that out finally and see that. So my son took that line right across that whole thing, the center, the stone circle, which is where we think you stood, the stone itself, the far distant notch, and he went across to England and he blew it up, and that line goes right through the center of one of the trilithones at Stonehenge. It was just kind of neat. It's like, if that's a coincidence, I'm like, wow, and I said, it was just after my dad died, and I wish you could see that, because we've been looking at that stone for decades. We never knew that if you had X-ray vision like Superman. After that, my son taught me how to use Google Earth a little bit. And if anybody can do this and are good at this, please do it and tell us if we have any errors, if we're making mistakes. But true south, and not magnetic, but true south goes through Machu Picchu. The winter solstice sunset goes through the moon pyramid at Teotihuacan, which we've been to. Not the sun pyramid, but the moon pyramid. Yes. The equinox sunrise goes through Pueblo Bonito. at Chaco Canyon. Again, is this a coincidence? I don't know. But the sunrise goes through the pyramids on the Canary Islands, which I didn't even know existed. We took it over there, and it goes right through the truncated pyramids. And the August 1st sunrise goes to the Great Pyramid in Cheops. So it's something that some people are interested in. Others will say, it could be coincidental, but there's a lot of coincidences there, you know?
Yeah.
I don't know, it's interesting, but there are ley lines on our hill. And I have a friend that was the one that set up the Santa Cruz West Coast Dowsers thing. And she's done a lot on our site. She goes, and I've tried the sticks myself. She says, I'm pretty good at it. I don't know, but
right.
My dad found the first well at our site using a dowsing rod back in 1958. You know, I didn't even know he was into that. You know, he told me years later.
Yeah, I'm not surprised. I think it's fabulous. You know, so before we continue, why don't we do, Amelia? Do you want to just do a station ID right now?
Not a problem.
And do that. Yeah. And just to answer Ron Watson, yes, we can see your comments and questions. So go ahead, fire away. Okay, go ahead, Amelia.
There's a lot of them. That's why. You are listening to The Outer Realm with Michelle DeRoche and Amelia Pisano, coming to you live from the beautiful city of New Orleans on 105.3 and 107.7 FM radio. Tonight, we have, for the first time, Dennis Stone with us, and we are discussing America's Stonehenge. If you missed it, don't worry. You can stream or listen to our archives on the platform you normally use. And a big shout out and thank you to the amazing people at Folgers Coffee for fully sponsoring our show from day one. And we thank you for your continued support. And also a big, huge shout out and thank you for our intro and outro to Dr. Snick, the sonic surgeon, Justin Snicker, award-winning composer and musician. You can find his music on Amazon and Bandcamp and find him on Facebook and Instagram. Speaking of which, if you are watching us right now on our Facebook page or you are watching us on YouTube, please hit that subscribe button and our like button as well. Just saying. I was a little disconnected because you caught me off guard because that's early. I'm like, ugh.
I know, that's okay. That's okay. I just figured we would do it because then we can just move on to some other stuff. Curiosity, because you mentioned that you had the Holzer files filming there, and I know you've got different people, paranormal investigators. We've talked about that coming onto the site. So let's just kind of slip into something on a little bit more of the metaphysical side. Is the site haunted? Like, why?
I'm sorry, what was the question?
Is the site haunted? Like, all these people are coming forward, like Holzer, like Alexandra as a friend. She's been on the show 2 or 3 times. And I mean, if she's going there, I know there's got to be something to it.
Right, yeah. I mean, people have been doing different type of psychic research since the 1960s. I think I mentioned to you, somebody had taken a crystal, sent it out to California, and they did a reading on it. There's a name for that. It's psychokinesis. I think that's it. Yeah, you can read. And then they fortunately sent, the crystal came out of the upper well. The upper well actually is in the main site, and it's 23 feet deep. But in the 1960s, it was full of muck and debris. And somebody started cleaning it in 1961. We got the report on that. And my dad finished it in 1961. In 63, my dad got down there. When he got to the bottom of it, it gets very wide. And somebody actually quarried the last 5 feet of it through solid bedrock and found a whole bunch of quartz crystals down there. You know, so.
Oh my God! I was just going to say, did you find crystals? Sorry, I'm so sorry. Yeah.
Oh yeah, I don't want to get side. Well, the crystal thing's interesting. But it doesn't seem to be a well for water. There's no vein of water. The only water that goes into there is from snow melt and when it rains. And then the water goes through, there's a wall between that and what we call the paddy area. I think originally it was a courtyard. And if the water gets up to a certain point, just a few feet, it actually floods out the whole area. Then it goes into another one of these underground man-made drains, and it helps to keep it dry. But it's not really a well for water. We think it is a mine shaft to extract the quartz crystals, and we're not still sure about that. But my dad wrote that up in the New Hampshire Archaeological Society, their newsletter in 1963, and we got that report too. And then somebody did the reading on it in California, and I have that report. I wish I had it here to tell you the details of what they felt. I just don't have it in front of me at the moment.
No, that's okay. That's okay. I just thought I'd
ask. Yeah, it is interesting. And then Holzer first visited us in 1970, and he kept coming almost every year through the 70s. And in 76, he was up, and he actually did Leonard Nimoy's In Search of, the second episode. He produced and directed that. And I was there during that. And I actually thought he forgot he actually did that, at the time,
Yes.
And then he passed away in 2009, like my dad did. Then the Holzer Files came out 2 years ago, and they came up and filmed us for that. Back in 74, that particular year, he brought in, July 12th of 74, he brought in Ingrid Beckman. I guess she was kind of getting her start in the paranormal at the time. Yes. And I don't know if she's passed away, but in 74, I remember she was pretty young at the time. And it's in his book, 1992 book that Hans wrote called Long Before Columbus. And there's Ingrid in there, and it was the summer months.
Check that.
Yeah, it's interesting. And her experience is all recorded. Hans used, I think, camera. He used a recorder, and then he put it into the book. Mm-hmm. November 12th, and the 12th for some reason, he brought in Ethel, and it's Ethel Johnson Myers. You know Ethel Myers?
Yes,
yeah.
Yes.
I always get the names backwards, Johnson, but it's Ethel, and she did a similar reading. And because she was coming up somehow or other, and we didn't have the internet back then, Betty Hill found out. Maybe it was in the local papers that Hans was bringing in this psychic. Betty Hill lived in Portsmouth, New Hampshire at the time, about 30 miles away, and she heard about this. She came over, and we got to meet her for the first time.
Very nice.
And I guess most of your listeners know about the Betty and Bonnie Hill experience,
absolutely.
And the movie that came out, and I think Estelle Parsons played Betty, and James Earl Jones played Barney, and it was a pretty good movie. I just watched part of it. Pretty cool. I think it was an NBC special too.
Yeah, it was pretty well done. Absolutely.
I think so. Yeah. And what an experience they had going into Canada and coming back on a vacation.
I know,
and then
surprise.
all bad stuff happened. So that just don't go to Canada, come back and have all sorts of bad stuff.
Expected.
Watch Rick Warren. Careful, beware of the boy.
Yeah.
It is a gift that keeps on giving.
We'll stay away from there.
I know.
But it was an amazing thing that they did, and so she came over to meet Hans, of course, and then she wanted a reading by Ethel, and she did. And I was there during that. I was like 20. I would have been 20 years old, and what I don't know, and I asked Hans Holzer. I've stayed in touch with his daughter since they came up 2 years ago to film, because she came up. It was the first time she actually came up on a show, Alexandra, and I just talked to her 2 days ago. But what I don't know is if Hans, where that report is. I would love to read the reading by Ethel over Betty Hill. What did she, what was that? That would be interesting.
All of this stuff. Yeah.
Yeah. So that would interest, I think, myself among yourself and probably your listeners too, to see what that reading was.
If Alexander wants to dig it up and come on the show and bring you one, and you just kind of collaborate on that.
I can mention it to her. Yeah, she's really wonderful, and she's in New York City, and carrying out
she's been on the show 3 times.
Yeah,
she has. Oh, okay. So
proud
give her a call.
That's why Michelle suggested it, because we're actually friends.
Yeah, absolutely.
Oh, that's great. She does want to come back and do another thing at our site, eventually. But she's got like 5 or 6 kids, so she's very, very busy too. She is carrying on Dad's work. They're keeping her busy.
She's wonderful. She's wonderful.
Yeah, I like her. Yeah, she's just. I never met her as a kid. Her sister, who's older, and her didn't come up, and that was part of the show too. Apparently Hans kept them away from our place, but Hans came out, many, many, many times up to our site. And then that book came out in '92, and that's where you'll see another. Nancy Abel was another psychic that came. He brought her, I think, in '75, I think.
But what were they picking up? Were they picking up on past civilizations, on spirit people, on extraterrestrial? If Hans was there, it's because there was something very interesting there for him.
I would suggest the book is available. Yeah, if you get the book, you can go into it. I can't remember all the different. I'd probably mix them up, because he has, I think, 4 different psychics in there. 3 of them mainly, but he mentioned some other, and in the book. So if you get the book, you can see exactly what he put down there.
I'll check, because I have all his books on digital.
Yeah, Long Before Columbus. 1992, Columbus's 500th year anniversary. So that's when the book came out.
Yeah.
I don't know the publisher.
Worth checking out.
Yeah.
Okay, we've got a comment. We're going to come up to this one.
Natalie Closon. Hi, Natalie. She says, I am guessing you've used D-Stretch. It's a tool for rock art researchers who wish to enhance images of pictographs, not an expensive program in case you haven't used it.
I haven't. No, I don't think we have used that at all. It's not familiar to me. I'd like to learn more about it. I do
I've
know
never
at
heard of it.
Stonehenge they use laser scanning, and that the guy with the LiDAR says if you want to get that device, it's $150,000. She may be doing something totally different, but laser
Wow.
scanning, they picked up things at Stonehenge that you can't see with your eyes that are inscriptions. You
Oh,
know,
yes. Yes.
so maybe
That's
that's kind of along that line. Yeah, we're open to that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Fantastic.
And Tamara asks if you have any magnetic anomalies at your site.
We do. We get a lot of, well, every time they come up to film us, whether it's Ancient Aliens did us with a drone and everybody's having problems with the batteries dying up there, the GPS not aligning. The one guy was doing infrared. He has a $13,000 drone. He does movies. He does all sorts of solar panel inspections, but he came up and he used his thermal imaging camera on our site.
Right.
And it was a $13,000 unit. And when he tried to launch it the last time, he was going to show it to the LiDAR gentleman. It would not get off the ground. And I guess it's something to do with the airspace, as A, B, C, D airspace, and it would not let him get up. He was so mad and so frustrated. It was a brand new, very expensive drone, but he has some thermal imaging. Those images are really interesting. They go down to about 14 inches. But we're open to any kind of, research. If people write a little proposal, and if it's not going to destroy the site, or harm it in any way, we're definitely open. What she said sounds really interesting to us. I'm sure there's other inscriptions we can't even see that we've been thinking about. What are we missing with our eyes? So that would be great.
How much is still underground?
Well, they've excavated 1 acre since 1937. If we took all the shovel test pit, we call them STPs, and all the excavations for 85 years, about 1 acre out of 100 and about 6 acres have been excavated. So that's not even like 1%,
No, that's very, very small.
Small part,
percentage of what you have. So
exactly.
What are you looking to do next with the site? I mean, aside from, keep going.
Yeah, I mean, we want to, use the latest technologies. I think we want to do some more OSL dating too, because we have thousands and thousands of feet of stone walls. Some of them are serpentine walls, others are walls that we don't think are colonial. And test these, if we can do more, but it's $1,000 per sample, and you have to wait about 2 years to get the results back.
That's really hard.
Which is kind of tough, yeah. And by the way, those 10 sites that they did do, Dr. Feathers, he put it out for peer review in the, it's called the Quaternary Geochronological Journal. The editors in Germany, they have 33 editors around the world, including, I think, 6 in the United States. And what they do is they read the article, they look at his data, and they put out a peer review on it. And that journal basically is all about different dating techniques, spin resonance, carbon dating, all sorts of different types of, including OSL and SL, which is surface illumination, which is another one they can do. I think we're going to do more of that because the dates are starting to show that the Patty family had nothing to do with the construction. And it's not a colonial site, as many of the mainstream have always written it off as some crazy farmer or bootlegger, bank robber, mail robber they assigned to this guy, which is basically libelous or slanderous. The guy wasn't any of these things. And they said he and his 6 husky sons built the whole site. He actually had 2 sons. One son died in Boston at 17 years old for some reason. The other one, his name was Seth, and he survived into adulthood. And he had 5 daughters. Maybe the daughters were all husky. I don't know. But he said the 6 husky sons built the site. It doesn't look like a farm. And why would they waste their time? They had to make a living, And he was a shoemaker
I don't
by
think
trade.
They would waste their time with that.
I know.
Like you say, you have to live. Your land is what sustained you. So you're going to use it to sustain you.
Exactly.
I can't see going to all that trouble, no matter how husky you girls are. There we go. Amelia, we get this. This is something else Natalie's saying.
Yep. Natalie said D-Stretch can bring out faint pictographs that are invisible to the naked eye. It works on a digital camera images. No special filters or lighting are needed. So is that like an app program or?
Wow.
Natalie, if you wouldn't mind, is that an app or a program that is downloaded your phone or to
if you could elaborate
because
on it, it'd be great.
is it
Oh, that'd be wonderful. Yeah.
Yeah, is it a computer program? Is it a phone app? How does it work? Pegnick asks, how does a compass react differently at the site?
Yeah, there is that. We have had that, definitely. There's one problem is that chain link fence that goes around the site covering that 1 acre. But also, even if you get away from that, there seems to be some magnetic anomalies. And one of the gentlemen that he was actually doing our 12-minute video that we have. You can see that on our website. It's a 12-minute introductory film. And he did some ads for us. He used to work for an ABC affiliate in New Hampshire. And he had and his background was basically engineering. He went into school for engineering. And when he was using his drone, and this is a different gentleman, the guy with the thermal imaging, and he was just laughing about it. He goes, my batteries are dying. all these batteries are charged up. They're all dead now. My drone battery died. He had his audio is separate with the battery, and that died. And he just says, there's got to be a reason for this. But he says, I think it's prosaic. Maybe it's something to do with the minerals in the ground. He goes, but he didn't know. He goes, the other side is there's something else going on here. And I can't, something maybe more supernatural, because I'm going to go with the down to earth first, he said. And maybe you have different minerals in the ground. We have the quartz, feldspar, mica we have there. Is there something else? So he was really trying to figure it out. It really puzzled. You could see he was really stretching, but he had an engineering background, and then he went into the whole media thing, and it puzzled him. And we've heard other people say the same thing, whether it was Ancient Aliens up having some issue, or, the Holzer Files. And we've had other people up there filming the Scott Walters show and stuff like that. So compasses do get screwed up, and that causes problems with the drones, because they use GPS basically, but even that was a problem too.
Yes.
Yeah, that became an issue too,
Drones are great, but if you lose one, holy cow.
They filmed the show here, and the drone went right into the trees, almost headed for the house. We're like,
that's a huge loss. That's a huge loss. They're beautiful, beautiful equipment. They're fascinating what they can do, the bird's eye view and everything, but you get a kick of wind or a bird come at it, you're done. I don't think there's insurance for that.
Do you have concerns over, or have you had any issues with vandalism on such a big site like that? You can't
we have, definitely. And it's some of it's juvenile over the years, but the worst was in 2019. It happened in September, I think 28th, 29th at our site. And somebody came up and they first cased a joint the day before, and we know who it is. They did catch him eventually, and they were from New Jersey actually. And they came back sometime during the hours of being closed, and I think it was Sunday morning. And we had him on the cameras inside the building. We have everybody for security, and we pretty much picked out who it was. But he came back and he used a 14-inch diamond saw, and he took it to the sacrificial table, and he carved several inches into it, I am Mark, which is his first name, across the top. We thought it was more biblical because he put a Christian cross, not an equilateral, but a Christian cross below it. And then he put down at the bottom, like, WWGA, WG1, and we had no idea what that meant. It was letters, and the letters are about a foot across. They were really big letters, and they went into the stone up to 6 inches, and the table's about a foot thick. So really, structurally, it wasn't good that he,
No.
Not only did he do that, but he took some sort of a sledgehammer, and this table was sitting on 4 legs, and it's part of it is actually into the oracle chamber wall. So the oracle chamber wall, then 4 legs that support this. And the table is about 9 feet long by about just under 6 feet wide and about 4.5 tons, so 9,000 pounds. He ended up knocking out 2 of the legs on the north side of the table. The table is orientated east and west, and the whole table came collapsing down, and it actually caused damage to the oracle tube, as I mentioned. And I mentioned during a repair, we found that the whole thing was flared out like a trumpet or clarinet or so forth. But he did that, and that afternoon, my son's it's amazing some of the stuff that kid comes up with, but he went on and he found out that it stood for where we go one, where we go all. So it's part of what we think is either the follower, and they're probably really nice people in it, but I don't consider him a nice person, what he tried to do to our site. He tried to destroy it, basically, and it's QAnon, but either part of it, or he thinks he's part of it, or maybe he's just a bad egg. I don't know.
They were just bad times.
Maybe he's not all there, though.
Yeah.
Yeah, he had some. He had some family tragedy that happened a few years earlier with his son, apparently. And by coming
Oh,
up to
wow.
our site, he thought he could redeem himself or something would be good. But by trying to destroy our site, it caused us an enormous amount of grief over the years. And we did repair the table. It took us 2 months to repair it, to get the thing back up and everything. But it's compromised forever. Our
Oh,
assistant
it's so
archaeologists.
unfair. It's so unfair.
Yeah, to damage an innocent site like that, and that's happening across the nation. I have another friend.
Yeah.
I mentioned Heather,
Yeah.
and she's in Aruba right now, but she's seen damage down there. We've done a radio show together, both of us as guests, talking about vandalism about 2 years ago. She's wonderful because even in national parks, people will take some of the petroglyphs, sell them on the black market. Other times, you see people take and just scratch over them. And that's
it's terrible. Spray
They did
painting,
it to the Colosseum.
graffiti.
Yeah, the Roman Colosseum for years was fenced off, so you couldn't touch it. And somebody was so upset about it, said, I paid all this money to come and see it. You don't let me touch it. And she spray painted it from the other side of the fence. And they both ended up in jail. I'm like, you don't do that kind of crap at the Vatican, like in Rome,
This is why I wanted to address it, because it is a problem around the world. You have these sites that are,
absolutely.
Crazy people.
Yes, and I'm sorry that you fell into that. So.
Yeah, it's very. My dad probably rolling, and everybody else that supported us, all the researchers over the years. So that same day, actually in Sedona, the Red Church, that was attacked that same day, and in New Hampshire, one of the oldest Masonic temples. So I think they don't like the Mason, was burnt to the ground. It's one of the oldest, and they never found out who did that. It was the same night. So it was like, whoa, what's going on here? And we felt like, we're in danger, and our site was in danger for more of this. So our assistant archaeologist, he went to school in Boulder, he's basically a professional stonemason. He's the one that helped us put it together. He did a wonderful job, and plus just making us feel better, because we were feeling horrible about this. And then we hear of other places being attacked, This gentleman that did it actually wanted to take down the Bunker Hill Monument, and he has social pictures in front of that, on Facebook. He went to Washington, D.C., wanted the Washington Monument. I have no idea, taken down. Then he wanted the Mount Rushmore, Crazy Horse. So he had a whole thing. And when they arrested him in New Jersey, his first comment was, "This is a thing about Texas." So we think he did something in Texas too. And then he was up in Nova Scotia, and our detective in Salem, New Hampshire, was wonderful. He did such a great job, because this is going to take time. The wheels of justice turn very slowly, and they did. He told us exactly what to expect. This guy was up in Nova Scotia, and I mentioned Scott and Haley did a tour from Nova Scotia, Knights Templar, that kind of thing. And they went to this thing called it was on the Oak Island show, and the owners really didn't want it on there. They didn't have, it's a whole thing with that. Somebody went up there, and when they got to this particular site in southern Nova Scotia, ancient carvings and everything, somebody had got in there and dug a 6-foot tunnel, and they also stacking stones up against the carvings, causing some disturbance. And that was, I guess, 2 months ago. And I think this is something that this gentleman wanted to do, but I'm not sure who did it, I'm like, oh my God, it's still going on. This guy's still out there, by the way. They caught him, and they found him incompetent to stand trial. So he's on the loose. He's not remorseful or regret. Yeah, he's just out there.
That's terrible. But this is
3
another
years
example here.
Peg says the guide stones are gone.
That's
Georgia. Yeah.
Love them or hate them, it's their monuments, and they're gone.
Yeah. They're gone. Yes. Yep. We were scared because they called that America Stonehenge too, American, and on NBC News with Lester Hood. He's I like that guy. But anyway, he was on talking about it. I'm like, he used our name instead of the American nickname, American Stone. They call it America Stonehenge. So our web hits went up, and my wife goes. So we told our detective, can you have a couple guys just check, because we don't want to copycat again,
No, you don't need that.
No, we don't need that. Yeah. It's been very stressful, very, very stressful.
Oh, I believe
I can't even imagine. I can't.
Yeah. Heartbreaking too.
Natalie says, from what I gather from the website, it's an app, but the better way to use it is onto the open source program ImageJ. So I'm guessing JPEG. So the app for G-Stretch, the website G-Stretch.
Is that with the E is an echo or a G?
D like David.
Yeah.
D.
Oh, David.
That's right.
Okay.
Yeah,
Oh,
there we
okay.
go.
A D isn't David.
Yeah,
Okay.
there it is.
It will always be here when you look at the archive.
Yeah.
I'll go back to
right
that.
up there for you. There we go.
Perfect. Oh,
So
that's
yeah,
great.
so go to the
Oh.
website. I imagine if you just Google it, you'll get all kinds of information on it.
I will check that out. And then we
Yeah.
can start playing around with that up there at the different stones and see if anything comes up. That would be really, even the ones we know about, like the deer carving, at ibex.
Yeah.
Just check that and see if there's anything else there too.
I would see
Wow.
when I try to remember things, I play with them like D for destiny stretch, D stretch, and then it stays. I'm one of those people who studied that way in school.
Right.
Yeah.
It helps to memorize it.
It does.
Excellent. Yeah.
It does.
Perfect.
Just something that you can relate to.
Well, I've got to write it down when I get off the show so I don't forget.
Yeah.
Or I can go back and look at it too. I know.
I'll put it back up for you
Yeah.
before we sign off.
Yeah. That's interesting. Yeah. Thank you very much for that. Yeah. We appreciate that. Yeah.
I guess you guys have a general idea how big everything is right now. That overhead that you sent me, how many acres is that? Is that your full 110 acres or is that?
Yeah, that's about 110 acres. Yeah, with the lines radiate out from the center. Yeah,
Yeah, because I'm looking at these sort of asterisks, sort of.
It does. Yes. Yeah.
Is that like the whole property from overhead?
Well, that's pretty much our property. Exactly. I will say that next door to the east of us, the family's owned the land for generations, and they just sold off about 20 acres of the land away from us. And in that area, there are walls, including that looked very similar to our wall patterns. And the gentleman that was the vice president of the era, living in Connecticut, was doing some. He's great. He does photogrammetry, amazing pictures of these serpent walls all over New England, including our site. But he said, "Hey, Dennis, that next door neighbor." He goes, "They got walls," and I said, "You know what? I just saw those too." And because they're putting homes in there now. But the good thing is the homes have a couple, like 3 acres of land, so they're not. If it was high density homes, they would have just leveled the whole thing,
Mm-hmm.
So these walls, although they get disturbed, they're still kind of intact with some holes where they had to put a driveway or the road through. But they look like our road. So maybe our site does continue out further, into our neighbor's property, So something that needs to be looked at more closely.
That would be a surprise to your neighbor.
Yeah, they may or may not like that, if they want to develop more of the property, or hey, we got Stonehenge here too, which I don't know why. It probably does, It could.
I'm just really excited for you for this journey because I can't even imagine what's underneath everything. Like people get really funky as well with mounds, like the serpent mounds or the walls. Can you dig under there or into them? Like, is this considered something sacred? Because it really is. In some places like Ohio, they're really, really protective of that thing.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Yeah. I mean, it's private property. We were made a state historic site in 1971. My dad was pushing for that a little bit, but they don't own the place. And most of the state historic sites in New Hampshire, I think the number I heard one time, like 70% are on private property. The other are state, like the Robert Frost on in Gary. My grandfather had him for a teacher, but that's state property and a state historic site in that case, and we're open year round. And the designation was kind of good, get us a little more recognition. Maybe, I don't know about protection.
Does it hinder you? Does it hinder you?
Archaeologically? No, it does not. No. And even if we became like on the National Register of Historic Sites or places, we tried that 20 years ago with Dr. Winkler from Penn State. He was doing research on our site starting in 1997 until 2001 when he suddenly passed away. Right after retirement from Penn State, he was an archaeoastronomer from 64 all the way up to 1999, I think. And he was working on getting us on the National Register of Historic Places. You have to go through your state capital and then Washington, D.C. He goes, oh, my God, the paperwork, the red tape, and all of this. He goes, and then he passed away. And then no further work was done on that, And I was flying at the airlines. My wife goes, you don't have time. You just fly and repair things when you come back home, fix all the broken stuff over there,
Yeah, we don't want our pilots on the internet while we're flying. And I love to fly, so don't take that away from me. Don't put that away.
No. I was on some of these. It's funny, when I was still flying until I retired in 2016 with Mark Eddy, it was great. He was getting me shows. And you have to have a certain legal time of rest, a very, very the FAA is very strict about that. But I was staying within the legal, rest period, but I still did my radio shows at the hotel sometime, but I had to be careful.
Right.
Because if some incident happened, they looked back and said, wait a minute, you were on a radio at this time, and that's all documented, and you had this incident and you didn't have your rest, that would be a federal violation, that would be bad. The company would get rid of me, number one. So I had to be careful about that. But I love flying. I did it for a long time, and I enjoyed, aviation, all that. And then I enjoyed the rocks, and my co-pilots always enjoyed talking with me, and I enjoyed talking with them about these sites, and we'd fly into St. Louis, and I'd say, oh yeah, there's Cahokia. I'd ask the controller one day, the approach controller says, hey, where's Cahokia? And the controllers are so wonderful, and it was quiet. You're not supposed to bother them. It's busy. It was very quiet. And he goes, what? You looking for the airport or for the mounds? I said, the mounds. He goes, well, 1 o'clock in about 5 miles. My co-pilot never knew anything about them. They're like, oh my God, So we did that a lot. We did that a lot over the years,
So you got to go
see everything.
Did it mess with the aircraft's compasses or anything like that? Because
I haven't seen that. No. Fortunately, no, our GPS or anything like that. Fortunately, So that's good. That's always good. You don't get lost. It's a good thing. Yeah.
Don't want to be a plane that's going renegade. Doesn't know where it's going.
That's bad. That's a bad day.
Can I tell you something personal and funny? My brother graduated. My brother and I are 18 years apart. He graduated high school in 1969, the year I was born, and he wanted to be a pilot. He went to his counselor, and being an immigrant from Italy and everything, like he really had to work hard for his grades and everything. Do you know what they told him? It's just a fad. It's passing. It's only for the rich. This is how far back it went.
Wow.
Yes, and his whole career was a fad.
Yeah. They said, oh, no, it's just for the rich. Flying's not going to take off.
Kidding.
At the time, I think it was just Pan Am was out there at the time. So I just thought you'd find it funny because
they discouraged him, huh? Wow.
Yeah.
I was just shocked. I said, wow, I thought they were supposed to encourage you. And they said, you won't get work, but
Yeah. That's interesting. That's fun. 1969. Wow. I got into it in 74, and I was trying to do the military, but my eyes weren't perfect vision, uncorrected, and I was colorblind. My grandfather's completely colorblind. So I went to the Air Force for the physical and everything in 1973, a year out of high school. And I said, well, everything is wonderful. Your grades, you passed the test, the oral was good. However, your eyes, you're not 20/20 uncorrected, you have some depth perception problem, and you're colorblind. I'm like, what does that mean? They said, you'll never fly for the military ever. So I did it on my own,
Good for you.
Because flying for the military isn't just flying, it's also shooting. It's also armory. So,
Yeah. During Vietnam War, too, it would have been a little dangerous to get into it. But, I wanted to serve the country. But they said, nope, you can work on the ground, but you can't fly. So I decided just to do it on my own, working at the museum and doing that, and I enjoyed both. I really did.
Absolutely. You got to see so many amazing places.
Yeah.
I know I was never on your plane because I didn't get to Boston until 2018 or 2017. So I know New Hampshire's my favorite state, even though I'm Canadian.
To see everything.
Yeah.
Well, we are almost like at the top of the hour. So this is the part where you promote yourself, promote the sites, go over the websites, any events that you have coming up that you'd like to promote for people to come to the site.
Well, it's a holiday. Yeah. Well, thank you so much. I want to first say thank you so much for having me on this evening. And I'm happy Mark connected us, but I just love being on your show so much. And if we have any future discoveries, and if I can get that app up, maybe we'll find some more petroglyphs. That would be wonderful.
And then just come back.
We can do that. But it is a holiday. It is a holiday season. And, I hope everybody has a wonderful holiday. And we got the next Wednesday, we'll have the winter solstice sunset.
Nice.
And so it was 52 years ago. We saw the very first one with my eyes. 3 years before that, the guy that cleared out the clearing in 1965 actually took the first photographs in 67. But so that anniversary is coming up, and then we'll have the February 1st, which is called Imbolc by the Celts, but it's also around Candlemas and Groundhog's Day. It's a cross-quarter day will be after that, So we have things going on throughout the year, and our website is stonehengeusa.com. We list all these different things.
Yes.
And if you go to that, you can pull up that 12-minute theater video and see it. You can do the app, and you can do a complete tour without ever coming. It won't cost you a dime to look at it. It's very good. If you use it at our site, you'll love it too.
Mhm.
And there's other website, telephone number, and email address, and we try to answer questions. You can call us too.
Mhm.
It's on Instagram and Facebook too. We have that information, so
And I
it's
have
all
all
there.
of
You know?
that.
Yeah.
All that is
Yeah.
in the show description. So all they have to do is click on the
Yeah.
link. All your links are there.
Everything's
So-
there. Yeah. So that should make it really easy. Thank you for doing that too.
Oh,
Thank you.
you're very welcome.
Appreciate
You'll
it.
have,
Yeah.
you'll have the website. I sent it to Michelle, and Michelle
Okay.
can email
I
it
just
to
sent
you.
it to you.
I Googled
Yes.
it for you. You might
Yeah.
be
Oh,
able to
thank you.
use it for the solstice. You never know, right?
We appreciate that. Thank you so
Oh,
much.
you're welcome.
What we'd like to
Yeah.
do is a live Facebook with the solstice, but
Ooh.
we'll see if we can do that sometime
No,
too. That'd be
you
kind of
might
fun.
be
Yeah.
able
Yeah.
to get pictures, like get this
Yeah,
program
yeah.
running before that and share that with everybody that day. You never know
We
if you
can
get
try
it,
that,
you know,
yeah.
going by then. It looks
It will.
simple.
Yeah. We'll
Yeah.
try
But,
it. We'll do it. Yeah, we'll do that eventually. Yeah, sounds good.
Thank
Well,
you so much.
thank you for
Thank
joining
you.
us. And I will
You're
be in
welcome.
touch with you. And I always like to surprise people with how many people were listening. So I'm
Oh,
going
thank
to
you.
bear of good news, hopefully. If I can
Yeah.
lasso our producer, that seems to be MIA. But we'll figure that out too. But thank you again for
Yes.
joining us. And I will email you shortly.
So thank both of you. I really enjoyed it.
Thank
Happy
you so
holidays
much.
to you. Try
And
to
to
stay
you as
warm.
well. Yeah, we'll try.
Yeah,
Cold up here.
right. It's freezing
So,
here.
In
yes.
New Orleans, you'll be okay though. You should.
Yeah.
We'll see. That will come hang
We'll
out with
see.
you.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you so much, Dennis. Nice to see you. Thank you
Yeah.
for joining us. Thank
Thank you
you.
very much.
Thank
Thank both of
you.
you and
Thank
your
Pleasure.
audience
you.
too.
Good night.
Thank
Good night
you.
now.
Good
Bye
night.
bye.
Well, that was just so much fun. Oh my gosh. Very informative. I did not see half of that coming. That was just fabulous. Again, the fact that it was that close and I had no bloody idea goes to show you and I research, man. I am
Yeah, she
on
does.
everything. And when this was brought to my attention, I'm like, how did I not know this? I was mortified that I did not know this.
That was funny.
No.
No, I mean, it was funny your excitement when we found out he was coming on. Michelle was just
I know.
ecstatic.
I love this stuff. I
Yeah.
love this stuff. It's fascinating. He's so delightful and he's so generous with his time. He's just wonderful. I am so glad that he came on and that we could share him with all of you guys. So definitely check him out. Go to the website, even go to Google Images. Check out all these pictures. It is fascinating. So huge thank you to Dennis Stone. I mean, huge for coming onto the show tonight, especially last minute. We're really, really grateful. Big thank you to Folgers Coffee, who sponsored the show. Big thank you to Dr. Snick, aka Justin Snicker, as a sponsor of the show for his intro and outro. We thank you. Whatever platform you guys are listening to, please, we would appreciate your support by either subscribing, following, liking, whatever the case may be. We would appreciate you. If you want to contact us, please do so at the Outer Realm Contact at gmail.com, the Outer Realm Contact at gmail.com, or just go to the Outer Realm Facebook page, click on email, and that will take you to us. Now, we are backing up a little bit because we are coming around to the holidays and we are going to be suspending some things. As far as booking for the shows, we are well into middle to end of March. Yes, we are.
Mhm.
I know. I know. But I can tell you, we've got phenomenal people coming on. It's just going to be really, really amazing. Names you've never heard of. Topics are just abundant and unbelievable. So definitely 2023 is going to be another fantastic year. Now, tomorrow night, we welcome Rob Goutreau. And he was in chat room earlier today. And of course, in keeping with a nice, more lighthearted December, he's going to be discussing, he has actually 4 books out now, by the way, Pets in the Afterlife, 1 through 4. And I will list them all in the show tomorrow for you guys to check them out. Yeah. And it's just going to be really amazing. We try to do this around this time of year, just because of the fact that, we lose our fur babies as well. And it's just always so nice to hear stories about them being around. So this is going to be wonderful. He's just been delightful to deal with over email. I cannot wait to meet him. reminder for tomorrow, we have a new show, week 2, Spirit Quest, The Journey of Life with Paul Francis, 6 to 8 p.m. Eastern, 5 to 7 Central. His last archive is just going through the roof. So, you guys, I have no doubt will enjoy the continuous content that he has to offer. And of course, 'tis the season. So, it's going to be really good. So go ahead and check him out. So in the meantime, guys, thank you so much for tuning in. I know the chat room has just been lighting up, but again, we tried to stick with questions that are geared to the topic, and there's just a lot of people that we missed. However, again, the most important thing is that he get all this information out because it's raising awareness for this amazing location. So hopefully the world will settle down a little bit, and we're going to go check it out. So anyway, thank you. We will see you all tomorrow night, and have a good evening.